Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel and welcome back to this second part of the 4-part video series on multi-agent systems. If you have straight away landed up here, I sincerely request you to go back and watch the introductory session. I'm going to leave the URL in the description below. In this video, we are going to focus on the first component. We are going to build the first agent which talks to an Flask API server, pulls the data from a dataset on user request. We will also build a bare minimum basic authentication around the Flask server. As usual, I'm going to split this video into two parts. The first video will cover the bare minimum theory which is required to set the right context. And in the second part, we will straight away dive into code and do some real action. Thank you for joining again and see you in the next section.
Welcome back to this section of the course. We will start with a walkthrough of the solution architecture, and then we will head over to VS Code where we will build the agent live in action. Let me go to the presentation mode. Here is a solution architecture for the entire solution which we will be building in phases. So I'll go from left to right. On the left hand side, I have the user. The user represents people like you and me, or it can be another agent as well. Now, the user talks to the supervisor agent. The supervisor agent in turn talks to any of the three agents which are listed out here. So the first agent is your fetch employee data. Second one is generate answer, and the third one is generate email. For this particular part, we are going to focus on fetch employee data only. Now, this particular agent is going to talk to your Flask application, and the Flask application is going to pull data from a data set. Now, I want to emphasize on the point data set because I am storing the data in a JSON document and not a real database. Now, I could have saved the data in a MySQL or Oracle database, but then just to make it a little simple, I am storing the data in a JSON dataset. However, if you want to extend this to a real use case, you can implement something in Postgres or MySQL or any database per se. On my mouse over, I have the Flask application here and I have the dataset here. Now, this is the authentication part. So I could have built a basic authentication within the Flask application itself, but if you look at any enterprise grade application, they generally build the authentication layer outside the application. So just to give it a feel of a real enterprise grade application, I have built the authentication using Firebase. Talking about the communication between the supervisor agent and the agents or the tools that I have over here, you can see there are two types of arrows. One is the dotted line and one is the bold line. Now the bold line represents communication from the supervisor to the agent. So the bold line represents the invocation of any of the agents or all of the agents based on the problem statement that the supervisor receives. And the dotted line represents the communication from the agent to the supervisor. Because one thing to note over here, you see the agents do not communicate between themselves or among themselves. They always talk back to the supervisor. So the first agent does the job, sends the information back to the supervisor, and the supervisor decides. That is where the brain of the LLM comes into the picture. It decides whether the information that it has received from one of the agent is good enough to serve the query, or it needs to reach out to some of the other agents to solve the next part of the problem statement, right? So that is where the communication between the supervisor agent and the other agents come into the picture. Fair enough. I don't think there's much to talk about on this slide, at least related to part one. We will talk about part two and three when the time comes. Cool. Let's head over to VS Code. We are on our project folder on VS Code. Let's go through the project structure a little bit. So start with, you see the first folder, which is the Leave Management OpenAI SDK. Now this has the code artifacts for the very first video which I had created, and I'm going to leave the link in the description. Take a look at it if you guys are interested about. The second folder is the one which is of our focus in this particular part. So this is the multi-agent LANGGRAPH. I have the documents. I'm not going through the documents folder today. This is something for tomorrow or the next part, which is on agentic RAG. Let me go to SRC. So I have the Flask app over here, and I have the agents. Before I go to the agents, let's dive into the Flask app. So the first file is our app underscore auth, and the second file is our read data. Before I go to the actual Flask app, let's go through the Firebase authentication. So you can see I have the Firebase configuration over here. I'll tell you how I got hold of this configuration in a minute. After that, I have the Firebase authentication out here, and then I have finally the authentication function which I have used, sign in with username and password, where I am passing the username and password. If the successful login is happening, we are returning success, otherwise, right? So the error message comes out. So let me take you to the agent authentication. So I'll go to my project first. So here I'm already there on my project. Let me go to the project settings. If you go to the project settings, you can see the name, project ID, project number, API key. And then if you come down under the configuration section, if you click on config, you can see this is the config which I copy pasted. So I have an API key, I have authentication, domain, project, messaging ID, app ID, whatever it takes. I've just copied it over and I've pasted it here, right? Now, let me take you to the project again and let me go to authentication. Now over here, you see I have 3 user IDs created. So I have ritabhratasaha@gmail.com. Can I extend it a little more? I don't think. I have raisaha@redhat.com and priya@gmail.com. So the first one, I'm not going to use it because I haven't created a user with that particular login ID. But then for the second two, I already have it. So that's what is going to be our candidate for testing once we build the Flask app. Let's move over. If I go to read data underscore app, it's a very, very basic Flask app. I'm not going to spend much of our time over here. Here is the data. So the data set, if you remember, in our solution architecture, I was talking about this data set. I think I can let go of this picture. Okay. Otherwise, it is causing an hindrance to the video. So I'm talking about this particular data set on my mouse over. This is the data set, which is here. Now I just asked Gemini to give me 5 records in a JSON format. Gemini just did it, right? Now, for the last 3, I did not even change the username because I'm not going to test using them. But for the first 2 are my candidate users using which I'm going to test it. And that is the reason I've put them together. What's next? This is the home route and this is find details. Find details, I'm reading the username and password, passing it over to the login. And once the login is successful, I am looking over the employee data dataset and checking whether there's a match on the username, which is nothing but the email ID. And if it is yes, then I'm sending it back as a JSON file. And if I don't find it, I am responding invalid login. Fair enough. Let's go ahead and start our Flask server. I think I already started it on my terminal. No, I did not start it. So here I am on the project window. If I do a tree, you will see that, the folder structure we just went over. So let me go to SRC. Sorry, I'm going to go to multi-agent. Under that SRC, under that Flask. Yeah, ls-l. I'm going to do a clear. And I'm going to say Python 3, read data, enter. Fantastic. Please note that I have already created a virtual environment called web apps, and I'm going to leave all the details of that particular virtual environment in the requirement.txt while I upload the video. Fair enough. It is ready. Now at this point of time, let me go back to my Safari. I think I already tested it. Let me refresh this and I see home again. So that means my Flask app is up and running. What is next? The next exercise is to go back and test my agent. Okay. So let's go back to my VS Code folder. And let's start looking at the agents. It's time to look at the agents. On the agent folder, you will see the .env file. Now, what is this .env file? It's an environmental file wherein the multiple API keys that we will be using. In this case, we have the OpenAI key and the Langsmith API keys saved. Now, Langsmith is something which I think I'll cover in the next video or maybe the video after that. Depends on the duration of the video because I generally try to keep the video in about 30 minutes because given the attention span of all the engineers today, it is highly recommended that you keep your uh, content crisp, right? So yeah, Langsmith is going to be covered in some other day, but for now, it's the API, open API key that we are going to use. Moving forward, the first file. Now I have two files. We'll go to the second one and I'll tell you what additional features are there. Now here, the first thing is I'm going to load the environmental details. Then I'm going to say that the LLM equals to model equals to GPT-4.0. Okay, let me share some experience out here, right? So I have been using 3.5 for some time, Turbo 3.5, but my experience says that with Turbo 3.5, the reasoning is not that great. However, the response time is much quicker than 4.0. So with 4.0, the response time has increased, but the reasoning has become much more clearer. Yeah. So here is a trade-off that you as an engineer will have to make, whether you want to go with a less accurate model. It depends on use case, right? With a less accurate model, or you want to go ahead with a highly performant model. Cool. We have the agentic tool, which is fetch employee data. Now, I'm not going to go through every detail on how you create a tool, how you create, multiple design patterns, because I expect that you already know a little bit of LangChain. If not, I would sincerely request you to go to academy.langchain.com. There are two fabulous courses. Please go ahead and watch them out. They're very short courses, maybe 2 hours each, and I am sure you will not regret. Though the internet is full of courses, if you go to YouTube, there are tons of material, but again, not everything is good, right? There are good materials indeed, but not everything is good. So but then the courses on LangChain, they come directly from the creator of LangChain, and you can definitely trust them. I did go through the course and I really found them very helpful. Okay, now on fetch data, the first thing that you will notice is the doc string. Now the doc string for any tool is very important because this is how the supervisor agent knows that these are the tools that are available and these are the features or functionalities that those tools can accomplish, right? Now in fetch data, we are getting the username and password. Then I am preparing a JSON variable called payload and passing it along with my base URL over here. Nothing fancy. And once I get the result, I am going to get it printed. Cool. The next thing, now that the tool is created, I have to build the agent. Now here I am building an open the employee agent, and I'm using the create react agent pattern, which is a function which is available built into LangChain. Just provide the details out here: model, tools, name, and prompt. Now there's no mandate that you have to use this particular function which is inbuilt of LangChain. You can use a vanilla version, and that is the same reason why I created the advanced section, wherein I wanted to give you a flavor of how to build that vanilla version, because as engineers we always think that we want to build something of our own and we do not want to be dependent on some function which might be deprecated tomorrow, right? What is the next one? The next one is the simple invocation. Now, if you look at the prompt, can you find the number of remaining sick leaves for the employee with username and password separately called out? Please ensure that the question mark is having a blank over here because question mark is not a part of the password. It is outside the password. I'm telling you because I made that mistake, right? Let's go ahead and execute it and watch it in action. The first part is executed. Second part is executed. I'm creating the agent that's executed, and finally I'm going to invoke this one. It takes about 4 to 5 seconds. Yes, 4.9 seconds. Had it been GPT 3.5, it would have been much faster. It would have been 1.5 seconds or 2 seconds. That's what my experience is. So if you see here, the basic salary, earned leaves, full name, and sick leave, they have been uh, returned by the agent. Now, the agent generally gives you three type of messages. First, the human message, then you have the AI message, and then you have the tool message. Now, do you want to look at only the tool message? Do you want to take a look at only the AI message or the human message? Depends on the use case. You can pull out that information from the response. Now, generally, it's a big response. You definitely don't want to do all of it, but let me show the entire response by splitting it up. So if you do a print pretty, it tells you the human message, the AI message, and the tool message. So if you look at the AI message, you will see that the name of the AI agent, then the tool call, which is fetch employee data, username and password, and finally the tool message, which is the fetch data, right? So this is the JSON output. Now, if I want to pull only the tool message, how do I do that? I will use the isInstance function, or maybe I can use the message dot, I think it's message dot type. Yes, you can say message dot type equals to AI, message dot type equals to tool or human, right? That's how it is. Now, before I move over to the next uh, notebook, let me talk about a little bit. I have the basic salary, earned leaves, and full leaves, and the sick leaves. Now, this is something which is in the format of JSON document. What if I want to take a look at it as structured data? That means I want it to be discrete, just the basic salary or just the earned leaves. I don't want to read that particular element from the dictionary. How do I do that? The way to do that is to apply structured data. Now, in the LANGGRAPH world, there is something called Pydantic. Now, I think you can use Pydantic in some other, some other tools as well. But then in the LangGraph world, Pydantic is very, very common. You can use Pydantic class to tell you that the expected format is different to that of what an AI is returning. So the AI tool is definitely going to give you a JSON response. You can convert that JSON response into a format which you wanted. And that's what we are going to see in the next section. Cool. Let's go ahead. Most of the code units over there are exactly the same, just a few differences. So you have the .env file, you have the fetch employee data function, and here is the Pydantic class which I have created. So I have the full name, which is a combination of your first name and last name. You have the basic salary, earned leaves, and your sick leaves. So the fetch employee data, everything is same, just that there's a difference in these few lines wherein you get the response and you don't stop there. Previously, we were stopping over there, right? We were happy with the dictionary in output. But right now, we are saying that, hey, we are not happy with the dictionary output. I want to pass it on to the Pydantic output parser, and I am specifically mentioning that I want the output in the type of an object where the object is equal to employee type, right? Um, what next? I have got hold of my structured data. Now, let's move ahead. Now, these are the few things which is very, very common for any LangGraph project. I'm not going to get into that. It's like, mention your tools, bind your tools with the LLM, and then you invoke it. I have a tool calling function. The tool calling function is just to invoke the right tool. And then I have the tools, which will have the list of tools. And then the tool calling function is actually having a conditional age. Now, if I print it, you will be able to understand. If it is relevant, then it will go to the tools. If it is irrelevant, if the prompt is irrelevant, then it will go to the end. Don't want to waste much of our time because these are some of the agentic basics. And as I said, this is not an agentic tutorial. I'm very, very focused on the use case that we are building. So please go ahead and take a look at the fundamentals if you do not know yet, and then you can come back and take a look at what is implemented here. Right now over here, I have created a chat loop. The primary reason is when you are in communicating with an agent, Most of the time it is not a single shot, so you don't ask one question and ask the agent to give you only one answer. It's always there's a refinement loop that goes on, right? That is the reason I have put a loop out here. So let's go ahead and execute one after the other and let's see that in action. Executed. This one is also executed. I'm going to define the graph. Okay, right now if you see, it is asking for user input. Let me go ahead and copy the user input from a text file where I have already provided the same user input which we used in the previous notebook. Right? I think it's done and it has given me the output. Now I don't want to proceed further, so for that I have to type end chat. The reason is if you look at my code, it is already expecting end chat so that it can end the loop, right? So end chat is the way that you can end the loop. Now that I have the output, let's go ahead. Right. So this is how you start. You have the tool calling LLM, very, very standard features. You have one route to the tools where right now it is only one tool, but then you can use multiple tools out there. And the other route is directly to the end. If you look at the output, I have the response from the API, which is a JSON, and I have the structured response from the API after application of the Pydantic class. And here you see it is no longer a JSON output, rather these are the different objects of our Pydantic class. So it works. Now, I want to go back to the previous notebook wherein we did not implement the entire LangGraph workflow. Rather, we use the create react agent function. Now, let me tell you, this is what something which we'll be using in future because it's easier. But then the general question that can come is if I am using the create react agent, what happens to that LangGraph workflow? Takes create react agent takes care of all that workflow in the background on itself, and as a developer, I need not be worried about it. Now, these are very standard practices of using it. However, if you think that you need a more complex workflow wherein you want to, let's say, you want to have multiple other routes and you want, let's say, after tools, you want to do something else by getting the data on the tools, then you will definitely have to do it in this way wherever we are doing it in a custom way, because create react agent doesn't give you that flexibility to customize. It expects certain inputs and it will give you an output because it's a function, right? So that's the demerit and the plus point of using a create react agent. If your use case is very, very simple, go ahead and use a create react agent. But then if you are having a complex requirement, then you cannot manipulate the way create react agent works. However, from the next video or the next agent development onwards, we will focus on the create react agent only because our use case is not very complicated. It's a unique use case, but it's not very complicated. But then I do have intentions to build something on a very complex note. Let me see. I have started working on it. Maybe it will be ready in another month. Thank you very much. I hope you have enjoyed it and see you in the next video. Thank you.